WHFL, TV 43, in Goldsboro, North Carolina.
How you doing today, Boneyard? I'm Patrick Lechner, and as you can see, I'll be filling in for Mr. Kevin Phillips today. What my message is to you today is something that's simple and common, something that's affected my life, and what I've noticed has been affecting a lot of other people too, especially Christians today. And it's the idea of what we have about God versus the true reality of who God is. And you can look throughout the Bible and you can search Scripture and you'll see it over and over again, even with the Old Testament men and women, how they struggled mightily with believing who God is versus their own idea and the reality. Take, for instance, here it is, what God promises to Abraham. Genesis chapter 15. Later the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision. Abram, don't be afraid. I will protect you and reward you greatly. But Abram answered, Lord, all-powerful, you have given me everything I could ask for except children. And when I die, Eliezer of Damascus will get all I own. You have not given me any children, and this servant of mine will inherit everything. The Lord replied, no. You will have a son of your own, and everything you have will be his. Then the Lord took Abram outside and said, look at the sky and see if you can count the stars. That's how many descendants you will have. Abram believed the Lord, so the Lord was pleased with him and accepted him. Now see, that's the reality of God. You know, our idea of God is, well, you know, God made me a promise of this, but future's looking bleak. You know, Abraham was in the situation, he had age against him. Time wasn't his friend, was no longer his friend, as well as his wife. You continue to read, and I won't do it for you, but we'll go ahead and jump right over to Genesis 16. Abram's wife Sarah had not been able to have any children, but she owned a young Egyptian slave woman named Hagar. And Sarah said to Abram, the Lord has not given me any children. Sleep with my slave, and if she has a child, it will be mine. This is the idea. And this is the problem that's been going on for so many times. It's the thing I see over and over again. God makes us a promise, and we don't believe it. We say we believe it, but then we take his promise and we pervert it. And we say, well, maybe God intended me to have a child in this way. Or maybe God intended me to be able to pay my light bill in this way. You know, we think, well, is it bad if I steal even though I'm feeding a hungry child? Yes, it's bad. You know, so we take the reality of what God is and who God is and everything that God stands for, and we pervert it. And we have this great idea. We'll say, you know what? It hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened in the past. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen at all. Maybe here's the answer. Abram, I have this Egyptian woman slave. Take her, impregnate her. She has a child. That'll be your son. This is how you're going to get the inheritance. This is how you're going to have the descendants that God promised you. This is how you're going to be able to count the stars, and still your children will outnumber them. Continue reading, Genesis 17:17. This is going to show us the dangers of that idea. Here it is, we have Abraham, bowed with his face to the ground and thought, I am almost 100 years old. Now you got to understand, they still haven't had a child yet. Sarah's convinced Abram to go ahead and sleep with the slave woman. Abram bowed down with his face to the ground and thought, I'm almost 100 years old. How can I become a father? And Sarah is 90. How can she have a child? So he started laughing. Then he asked God, why not let Ishmael inherit what you have promised? See, now here it is. Abraham knew the promise. Just a few chapters ago, Abraham knew the promise. He believed God. God was pleased with him. Chapter later, Sarah perverts that promise, convinces Abraham to sleep with the slave woman to have a child. Now here it is where Abraham is not only taking the promise that he distorted, but now trying to give it back to God with his own idea. He said, okay, God, here's my idea. Here's my idea of the promise that you gave me, on the promise that I sat here and said that I truly do rely on you. How about let Ishmael inherit everything that I have? Why don't we just make it that way? Make it simple for you. See, when we start to form our own ideas of who God is, that's when we start getting in trouble. That's when we start losing sight of who Christ is. That's when we start losing our faith. I'm not very big on reading, but when I do read, I always enjoy to read Philip Yancey. And in one of his books, The Bible That Jesus Read, Yancey wrote that the book of Psalms gives examples of ordinary people, just like you and me, that are struggling mightily to align what they believe about God and what they actually experience. And if you think about it, man, it's true. If you read through the Psalms, you know, 1 minute they're way up here, you know, oh Lord God, I praise thee. The next minute, oh man, I'm destroyed. My enemies, they've overcome me. And it seems like you have a group of bipolar people that's orchestrated the Bible. But see, this is what God is trying to get us to, the reality of them. Stop with the ideas. Stop with the tingling thoughts, the things that just only bring us temporary joy or immediate satisfaction to ourselves or a quick answer to a long drawn out problem. You know, when I was young, I wasn't born a Christian. You know, I wasn't raised in the church. Nobody really told me about Jesus. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that someone finally did tell me who Christ is. You know, the whole time before that, Christmas and Easter was pretty much just a holiday. The days that we got off from school, pretty lights, gifts, candy, things like that. But when finally somebody did tell me about Christ, I just fell madly in love with the idea that somebody saw enough in me to die for me. Now, I wish I could say I continued on that route, but I fell into this whole idea versus reality thing. You know, I went to church, I listened to the pastors and the preachers, and I read and I studied and I prayed and I assumed and I assumed, and I continued to assume just like Job's friends did. You know, you do good, you're going to get good. You do bad, you're going to get bad. So I wondered, here it is, I'm trying to do everything good that I possibly can, because this is my idea of God. This is what I was taught, that if you do good, you're going to get good. You're going to be blessed. God's going to just lay out everything before you. You get sick, well, pray in his name that by his stripes you are healed. And still, there I am sick. There I am poor. There I am struggling. There I am fighting an addiction. There I am fighting depression. There I am fighting suicide. There I am just fighting all these things. All these ghosts coming after me. And it's like, well, God, where are you? Where are you? You said you were going to be here for me, but where are you? I'm looking around, but where are you? Just like Abraham, you promised him a son, but where was he? Fine, you don't want to give me a son? Sarah says she has a slave woman right over there that can bear me a son. This is my idea of you. This is my idea. I'll go ahead and conceive. And I'll have my own son in my own way to fulfill your promise. So here it is. I'm battling the depression. I'm battling suicide. I'm battling lust. I'm battling alcoholism. I'm battling drugs. Because I was looking for peace. And you promised me peace. You said that you would bring us peace that surpasses all understanding. Where was my peace? I found it in alcohol, or so I thought. I found it in drugs, or so I thought. I found it in women, or so I thought. I found it in fighting, or so I thought. It wasn't until this one day, many years later, that Christ found me at the bottom of a bottle. I had finished drinking about a fifth of 100 proof. And I get up and I go to the bathroom. I'm in my apartment. I remember it clearly. A lot of the time, most of the time when I used to drink, you know, you really couldn't remember things. But this was clear as day. I get up to go use the bathroom, and in my hallway there was a mirror. And the person I seen in that mirror, I hated. I hated. I wanted to give up. Church, I wanted to give up. I wanted to die. I wanted to take my own life, but I was frustrated with God because I didn't have the strength to take my own life. His hand was on me, and I wanted him to let go. But at the same time, it was a rock and a hard place because I didn't want to be like my father. See, my father took that way out. And I didn't want to be like him, but at the same time, I didn't want to live. So I was stuck between living, dying, idea, reality. So I see the person in the mirror that I hate, disgusted, drunken, smash my face right into the mirror, and I'm laying there, blood running down my face, broken glass laid around me, and I'm begging God, if you answer any prayer, answer me this one. What is it that I have to do to make you stop loving me? And it was the most peaceful voice that I ever heard in my life. When Christ came down to me where I was at the bottom of a bottle, not in a pew, not in church with hands raised up, but on the floor, bloody, smelly, broken, drunk. And he said, there's nothing you can do. I've already died on that cross for you. That's the reality. That was the peace I was looking for. That no drug, no alcohol, woman, money, fight could ever compare with. That was it. Now I wish I could easily say that I went right back into church after that, but I didn't. I was still hard-headed. I was still struggling with, I still didn't want to live. I still didn't care to live. Yeah, every morning, I would just look for death. I want you to do me a favor. And this is entirely up to you if you'd like, but imagine for a moment. See, this is the great part about what God's given me to talk about, the idea versus the reality. And it was so beautiful when I seen it. But imagine for a moment, close your eyes, that you being one of the 12, the day that our Savior was crucified. Think about all the times where you walked with him, that you ate with him, and only finding yourself lost in the beauty of his words as he spoke of everlasting life, love, and redemption. To seeing with your own eyes the many miracles he performed. To what only seemed like moments ago you laid in a field listening to the voice of a king, that when he spoke, the authority of his word could be heard by thousands. To now this, a beaten, bruised, bloody mess of a man, unrecognizable by appearance, who once healed the sick and called the dead back to life, but now can't even save his own self. The disciples his followers had this beautiful idea of who Jesus was supposed to be, but ran straight into a brick wall on the day of his crucifixion. They envisioned Jesus not with a crown of thorns, but a crown of jewels. They envisioned him to be lifted up on a throne, not a cross. And that was one of the most beautiful things I ever saw. When we finally transfer our hearts and our minds from this box of an idea of who God is, and we finally just say, God, I want to know who you really are. Good or bad, whatever happens, I want to know who you really are. In John 12, Jesus said, unless the seed falls to the ground, it dies alone. You see, it wasn't the nails that held Christ to that cross. It was his love for you. He could have gotten himself down. He could have healed himself. The outcome could have been totally different. But because of you, because of me, because of people like me, and because of people like you, he stayed on that cross. C.S. Lewis wrote in the Screw Tape Letters, from his book, The Screw Tape Letters, God cannot tempt to virtue as we do to vice. He wants us to learn to walk and must therefore take away his hand. And if only the will to walk is there, he is pleased even with our stumbles. That's amazing. We have a God with love like that. Doesn't demand perfection, just the will to do it. Just the will to love one another, to love him, to seek him. Just the simple will to do it. God doesn't keep score of how many times you've messed up when you've tried serving him. God rejoices in the fact when you try. Every failed attempt is still an attempt. But today, so many believe that if I don't do it right, then God's not pleased. It's not true, church. It's not true. If it was true, then the good Lord's given up on me long ago, because God knows how many times I've tried and failed. And that's one of the things I still continue to struggle with now. All the things I've tried and continued to fail over and over and over. You know, now I'm moving into another venture, still working with the church and seeing where this leads me. You know, and I'm praying God that, you know, that my failures aren't failures on my behalf, but just my failures to teach me and how to continue to trust you. I learned from Moses, the failure doesn't mean defeat. It doesn't mean that God's disappointed in you. It doesn't mean that you're doing wrong. I mean, can you imagine God calling Moses out into the wilderness to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt? And for 40 years to just sit there and wander around in the desert. And they constantly see them messing up. I mean, will we say that Moses was a failure, even though it took him 40 years? No. God didn't see him as a failure. And God doesn't see you as a failure, no matter how long it takes. God believes in you. If nobody else does, God does. It's a beautiful thing that a king would trust a servant with something so precious as another person. You know, I tell the kids all the time that I've worked with, you know, what an honor it is that God would allow me to serve them. You know, here it is, an individual, regardless of income, race. Here it is that someone that Christ suffered for, you know, someone that Christ died for, that he wept for, that he loved. Here it is, something that God purchased and now places in your hands. It says, take care of it. I trust you. I trust you. The most valuable thing on the face of this earth. And he places it in our hands. And he trusts us with it. That we love one another. That we serve one another. That we help one another. That we teach one another. That we lead one another. I thank you for giving me this opportunity. I thank Kevin and the Boneyard and all the staff here for giving me this opportunity.